He vanished into the night. One moment, a 20-year-old American college student was laughing with friends on a crowded street in one of Europe's most famous party districts. Just hours later, he would be found dead in the waters of the Mediterranean Sea. No witnesses, no clear explanation, and the final surveillance video showing him walking away with someone nobody has ever identified. What really happened to James Gracey during those final hours in Barcelona? James Jimmy Paul Gracey was 20 years old. He grew up in Elmhurst, Illinois, a quiet suburban community where neighbors knew each other and families watched their children grow up together. Jimmy was the youngest of 5 siblings and deeply loved by his family. He was a student at the University of Alabama studying accounting. Friends described him as hardworking, responsible, and incredibly friendly. He was the kind of person who could strike up a conversation with anyone. Jimmy balanced his studies with a social life full of college memories, football games, fraternity events, and late-night conversations with friends. He had big plans for the future: internships, a successful career, a life he was just beginning to build. But in March 2026, Jimmy took a trip that was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime adventure, a visit to Barcelona, Spain, one of Europe's most vibrant cities. It was meant to be a celebration. Instead, it became the final chapter of his life. It was March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Barcelona's beachfront nightlife was alive with music, flashing lights, and crowds of tourists celebrating late into the night. Jimmy was out with friends in the Port Olympic district, an area known for its beach clubs and packed nightclubs. They spent the evening moving from one bar to another, laughing, dancing, enjoying the energy of the city. Everything seemed normal, but sometime around 3 a.m., things changed. Friends began leaving the club and preparing to head back to their apartments. When they looked for Jimmy, he was nowhere to be found. Security cameras later showed him outside the nightclub wearing a white t-shirt and dark pants. He appeared calm, but then the footage captured something strange. Jimmy was seen walking away with another person, someone who has never been publicly identified. Moments later, both of them disappeared from camera view. And that was the last confirmed sighting of James Gracey. At first, his friends assumed Jimmy had simply left with someone else or taken a different route back. But when he didn't return to the apartment that night, concern quickly turned to panic. By the next morning, his phone was unreachable. There were no messages, no calls, no signs of where he might have gone. A missing person report was filed and the search began. Police started reviewing surveillance footage and questioning people who had been in the area that night. Then, 2 days later, something disturbing was discovered. Near Somorrostro Beach, not far from the nightclub where Jimmy was last seen, someone spotted a wallet floating in the water. It belonged to James Gracey. Soon after, divers searched the nearby waters, and tragically, they found his body submerged beneath the surface. The discovery shocked both local authorities and Jimmy's family back in the United States. But it also raised an even bigger question. How did he end up in the water? Spanish authorities began examining every possible explanation. They reviewed hours of surveillance footage from nearby streets and buildings. Investigators retraced Jimmy's last known movements. They spoke with friends, club staff, and people who had been near the beach that night. But the investigation quickly ran into a major problem. There were very few clues. No clear evidence of an attack, no witnesses who saw him fall or enter the water, and no one who could identify the person seen with him in the final video. Detectives looked into the possibility of robbery or assault. They also considered the possibility that Jimmy may have accidentally fallen into the water. But without clear physical evidence or witnesses, the case became extremely difficult to piece together. Meanwhile, speculation began spreading online. Some believed he may have been targeted. Others believed alcohol or disorientation may have played a role. But none of these theories could be confirmed. the timeline of Jimmy's final hours remained incomplete. Then came a surprising announcement from authorities. Officials stated that early findings suggested there may not have been any foul play involved. According to investigators, the evidence appeared to point towards a possible accident. One theory suggested that Jimmy may have wandered near the waterfront and fallen into the water, but this explanation left many people unconvinced. Barcelona's beachfront areas are usually busy even late at night, so how could someone fall into the water unnoticed? And who was the mysterious person seen with Jimmy in the final surveillance footage? Those questions have never been fully answered. To this day, the complete details of the forensic investigation have not been publicly released, which has only added to the mystery surrounding the case. Eventually, authorities closed the missing person investigation after confirming Jimmy's body had been recovered. But the deeper question remains. What exactly happened during those final moments before he ended up in the water? There have been no arrests, no suspects officially named, and no definitive explanation provided. For Jimmy's family and friends, the tragedy left behind more than grief. It left behind uncertainty, the kind of uncertainty that can haunt people for years. Somewhere in the quiet streets of Barcelona, between the flashing lights of the nightclub and the dark waters of the Mediterranean, something happened to James Gracey. Maybe it was a tragic accident. Maybe it was something far more sinister. But the truth is that during those final hours of his life, only one person truly knows what happened. And that person may never speak.